Today is going to be for my singles. We're going to talk about dating. I used to do workshops on dating like a decade ago, and I acknowledge that times have changed. So I want to talk about dating and how to do it authentically. If you know my work by now, that's really the core of it, is how to be authentically you. And how can we approach dating in a world where it's kind of really weird and bizarre and back to front, like it's really backwards with dating apps. And it's not to say that you can't use dating apps, but let's talk about that as well as how to use them if you're going to use them. And how to really come back to just being more social creatures that aren't so socially awkward and that might find this whole process kind of really weird and uncomfortable and like it's not working, because this is what I'm hearing through clients. This is what I'm observing when I kind of study, that it ain't easy for singles these days. So let's talk about some of the challenges, and let's talk about maybe how we can change the perspective and the way that you show up within it so that you really truly do get to receive what it is that you desire most. So let's dive in. This is Corinne Bloom, and you're listening to Raw Conversations. I appreciate that there's probably going to be different age ranges and also women and men that are listening. So I'm going to do my best to try and include everyone, because if you're 40 and above, you probably remember what it was like to date before apps and online dating. And if you're in your 20s and early 30s, especially, you probably don't really have so much of the experience of what it was like without dating apps and online dating. I think Esther Perel was saying something that this was in New York, that 65% of people use online dating apps in order to meet someone. And also those same people were saying that they hate using apps as a way to meet people. So it's kind of an interesting dilemma. At the core of it, as I said in the beginning, this really comes down to however you choose to go about dating. The most important thing is, how can you do it authentically? And I think what's happening right now is we have become a society that is in a way becoming more and more socially awkward and almost kind of antisocial. And what I mean by that is because before we walked around without phones, I have a whole memory of a huge part of my life without even having a phone in my hand or in my purse for that matter. Like, when I was young, you didn't have mobile phones, or maybe it was a car phone, or maybe it was a phone that you kept in in your car for emergency. Like, I remember that. I was back in the day when I had like a pager. It wasn't just for drug dealers. So, God, everything has changed so much because of technology. And so what I mean that this culture, this society has kind of become a little bit more antisocial is because so many people are just looking at their phones. I'm still astounded when I go out and I see couples. I was at the beach the other day, and, couples or families that are there, and they're lying next to each other, but everyone is individually looking at their phone. And I was thinking, God, this is so weird. And what I hear from my singles, especially that live in the city, is that, they go on the tube, they go on the bus, they go anywhere, and everyone is just looking down at their phones. So nobody really speaks to each other anymore. Nobody has little conversations. Nobody looks up and smiles. And then people go, why can't I meet anyone? And I hate dating apps. And dating apps are, on one hand, you can go, okay, well, it's a useful way to get to know someone, people, to get to see people that you might live in a city and you feel like you're never going to meet someone. But it's also a very kind of back to front process, because you're basically looking at someone like a job interview. You're seeing if their CV matches up to what you're looking for. And the thing is, in that, there is zero room for chemistry and energy to be picked up. Sometimes you can pick up through a photo, but generally, how we used to meet people is you notice someone, you catch their eye, there's a chemistry, there's an attraction, and that pulls you to want to go and speak to that person. And then it happens very organically. That's not happening as much these days because people are, I was listening to a relationship coach that was saying you can use dating apps, but do not depend on them. So there's a lot of people that think I can only meet someone if I'm on a dating app, even if I hate it. I can only meet someone like that. That's not true. When I was younger, I met people in the most random ways. So a lot of people will say, this even came up in a session, and it's like they named off the things that they do and be like, well, but that's a very solitary act. I wouldn't meet anyone like that. And my perspective, being a child of the 80s and being from that generation, I'd be like, oh, but those are great ways to meet someone. And here's the thing, because dating apps have become this thing of like, you need to know all of this stuff about someone before you meet them, before you are even interested on going on a date with them. And that's fine. If you're going through that way, like, yes, okay, put the filters in because you don't want to waste your time. However, what real attraction is, all it takes to meet someone is that you catch their eye and that there's a spark of chemistry between the two of you that makes you feel curious enough to want to get to know that person a little bit more. Now, if people are looking down at their phones, if they're believing, I'm not going to meet anyone unless it's on an app, they're walking around and they're not looking at other people. They're not looking up. And they've energetically shut themselves in because the belief is, I won't meet someone in just my daily life. I can only meet them on an app. I can only meet them at the bar. I can only meet them at the club. I don't know about how old you are and what your experience has been like, but for me, when I was younger, like I said, I met people at a grocery store. I met people through, friends at like that were going out and doing something. Or I met people like in an art gallery. I don't, just like whatever. That there was no dependency on anything technological back in my day. So you had to meet people organically. And this is the amazing thing about the power of our belief. And then also the power of our habit, right? So the power of the belief that has said, you will only meet someone if you go onto a dating app. Then that's the reality that's created. That's what people believe. What you believe is what you see. And then our culture has adapted to that and now is like, well, no, you don't talk to people. You don't have just a little chit chat. I mean, so many people rarely even look at the cashier when they go buy something. I mean, now everything is automated. You just go to a machine and you do it yourself. And so you could say everything that people are doing in modern society is kind of a solitary act. Whereas those used to be the beautiful moments. Like I remember when I was living in Mill Valley, California, and like this is when Whole Foods used to actually be like a good organic natural food store, like kind of hippie back in the days. And it used to be really fun to go there because I would have great conversations with the people that worked there. They were really cool people. I even dated one or two people from there because it was just like, that's how you kind of met. You had interesting conversations. People were, you could say, kind of like-minded because they were interested in healthy food. It's not that anymore. I don't think Whole Foods is that anymore. I don't know. I don't live in the States anymore, but I'm pointing out that story because that's kind of how things worked. People spoke to each other. You'd have a little chat, and that was so lovely. We're social creatures and we need that. So I would really encourage you, especially if you're living in a city, don't underestimate the power of just little interactions just to keep our social skills intact. Because a lot of what's happening with dating now is because, one, people are dependent on going on an app. So even if they go out and have a social night, there's a little bit of, expectation, or the opposite could be that there's a little bit of barriers, that people are much more self-protective. And also I think people are really scared to approach each other. They're scared to just be spontaneous because, again, the app is like, well, at least I know what are their interests, what are their values if they share it, all of these things that normally what you'd have to do is you just have to talk to someone to get to know, and first there's the attraction, then there's the energetic, chemistry. And then there's the conversation to help you get to know. Do we have shared values? Do we have similar hobbies? What do we want in life? What do we want from relationship? And you get to know that person. And along the way, you might go, cool person, but nope, doesn't share my values. Doesn't share the trajectory of life in a similar enough way that that's going to work for us as a couple. And so then you move on and you get to know someone else. There's also now, I think, because dating has become really just harder for people, because I think our society has become harder because it is becoming more antisocial. It is harder to meet people because, again, our habits and our belief systems. There's also greater pressure, and there's greater, maybe more of a sense of hopelessness, and there's more of a sense of just that it's really hard. And so then there's a bit more pressure as well. There's more pressure coming into it. There's more beliefs that are going into it. There's more of a story. There's a narrative. This is hard. I'm never going to meet someone. There's nobody out there. And I really think that it comes down to what is our perspective. Because what I said 10 years ago, and I will still say that now, is all it takes is one glance and chemistry to get to know someone. And ultimately, all it takes is one person for us to really like, for us to be in a relationship, and for our paths to cross at just the right time. I still deep down will always be a romantic that believes that love is possible and that relationship is possible. And sometimes you really got to dig in the dark, and you might not have anything to compare it to. You might not have anything in your past that says, oh, that's possible. And you've got to be open to the unknown. And you've got to be open to the mystery of life. And you've also really got to trust that what your heart desires, it can and will be possible. But it comes down to what are our beliefs, what are our perspectives, and are we being open to it? So when I'm working with singles, a lot of the work is around firstly looking at what are the wounds? What are the fears? What are the triggers? What are the things that we put up in self-protection that keeps us from being in relationship? What are the things that we need to work through so that we're not just attracting the same kind of person or seeing the same kind of person that isn't in resonance with us, that is actually just kind of reaffirming our limiting beliefs or lack of self-worth? So first is always the inner work. Always the inner work. And it's not to say that there's anything wrong with you. There's no part of you that needs to be fixed. You're not broken. It's just that there are parts of you that need your loving attention. And when you love and you fully accept and embrace all of you, you're going to be more open to receiving love. It's not that you're not lovable as you are right now and that you can't be loved and nobody will love you. You just might not receive it. Right? You might not see it. You might not allow it even to come in because there's a part of you that's like, I want love, but it terrifies the shit out of me because I've been hurt. So I want it, but I'm not going to let it in. And this is all unconscious. So that's why the self-awareness and the inner work is so important. The next step, once you've really come to a place of accepting yourself, and that doesn't mean being perfect. That means like, I accept all the quirks and my neuroses and, I know how to tend to my wound. It's not about getting rid of any parts of us. It's about loving them and transforming them, alchemizing them. And also letting go of an old narrative and story and set of beliefs that go with it that aren't serving us anymore. Sometimes we do need to get to that point of like, that doesn't serve me anymore. So I'm not going to believe in it anymore. The moment we stop believing in it, we don't give it the same kind of energy. It can't exist. Otherwise, we're watering it. We're literally giving it fuel and food for it to continue to exist. So the best thing that we can do is not get rid of something, but just stop believing in it. And then you bring something in instead of, right? You bring in a belief that does support you. Now, a lot of what happens is that we look at things in life, so much of it comes down to perspective and our perception of things. It's very hard to do so objectively because often we have a story attached to it. And that's a really, I know I say this a lot in my work, but it's really good to be aware of when we're in a story and what are the emotions that get attached to that story. Because then that is an indication that we're not coming from as objective place as we can. And another good way of recognizing this is that normally I will find that people are either really confident in their work and not so confident in relationship, or really confident in relationship but not so confident in work. And so sometimes that's an interesting kind of parallel to be able to bounce off of, because if you were to take the same thing in an area, let's say you're more insecure about relationship and you have a certain set of beliefs and way that you perceive it. And if I were to translate that into your work, you'd be like, oh God, no, I don't look at it that way. You wouldn't go, oh no, it hasn't happened in the past, or, I'm afraid of getting hurt, or so I'm not going to go for my work. You still would do your work. You would still go for it. You would still put yourself out there because you believe in yourself in it. It has a different meaning. What we attach meaning to, the story that goes along with that meaning, and the emotions that are attached that come along with that meaning, makes all the difference in the world. You let go of the story, you change the meaning, the whole thing, you look through a completely different set of a lens, through a different set of eyes. So be really mindful. What is my story? What is my story around relationship? What is my story around dating? What is my story around women, men, love, my own worth? And so then when you catch yourself in the story and it pulls you into this kind of certain set of emotions and thought patterns, you can see it for what it is and be disciplined with it to go, is this story serving me? Are these feelings making me feel good? Are these thoughts making me feel good? And if the answer to that is no, then you are absolutely in control of changing that narrative and giving a different meaning to your perspective on life in general and any particular area of life, be it relationship or be it work. But right now we're talking about relationships. So if your narrative around relationship is one that brings you into a really hopeless state, you get to change that. But it means you stop believing that narrative. And if it means on a deeper level that you need to still work on your sense of worth, not because it's not there, we're innately worthy, we're innately lovable, we're innately significant. We just don't recognize it within ourselves. So that's the inner work. So I want to jump to now how to date authentically. There's a lot of, one thing that made me kind of chuckle when I was doing these workshops, probably over a decade now, I would have people do exercises in couples. And one thing that came up a lot is that, especially, I'm going to put it in the context of dating, most people are so nervous going into dating. They're more focused on what does that person think about me than they are just being present, getting to know that person. And so when someone goes in and they're like, oh God, I'm so nervous, I'm so scared, is that person going to like me? Are they not going to like me? I'm like, you know what? It's pretty high probability that that person is not even focusing on you because they're so worried about the very same thing that actually each person is focusing on themselves. Both people are nervous. The place that you want to get to in order to be able to date authentically is you get to just be you. And you get to just get to know somebody. So you're not wasting all of this energy worrying about, do I look right? Do I sound right? Am I saying the right thing? Do they like me? Am I smart enough? Am I funny enough? Am I beautiful enough? Am I handsome enough? Is my outfit good? I shouldn't have said that. Oh, that gesture, that gesticulation, that tone, that facial, you know what I mean? That is so much scrutiny, self-criticism. Like how can people enjoy dating if that's what they're doing, right? That is really exhausting. We want to get to a point where we feel comfortable within ourselves enough, even with our quirks. I'm not saying that you need to have yourself totally figured out, that you're 100% confident in yourself. Your self-esteem is through the roof and then you can go out and be comfortable dating. No, we've got to be comfortable being human. That's what's going to give us confidence to date or to do anything. Confidence is not being your perfect self. Confidence is that you are comfortable being you no matter what. That's how to go into dating authentically, is you get to be you and feel comfortable. That's it. And so then when we can come from that perspective, I'm just going to be me, and I'm going to be comfortable being me. And I'm going to be open to getting to know someone. I'm going to be open to being approached. I'm going to find the courage to approach. And I'm just going to take it a little less seriously. Like, we're taking this all very seriously. And again, the app is like, well, you need to match and you need to have the same this and that and the other. It's the job interview, right? Dating is not a job interview. It's a getting to know someone, and it's human. It's not based on skills. You need to have human interaction. So firstly, we need to feel comfortable within ourselves. And if we're nervous, that's okay. You can go, wow, I feel really nervous right now. Can you be comfortable with that? Can you be okay with that? Do you see what I'm saying? Comfortable isn't I need to be perfect and confident. Comfortable is I can be nervous, but I'm okay with it because I'm here taking care of myself. I'm not going to abandon myself. I'm not going to reject myself. I'm not going to judge and criticize myself. I'm just going to be here. And if I do something and I kind of feel embarrassed, you can laugh, right? Like, it's okay. It's okay. So then I want to talk about approaching and being approached. This has to do with, are we allowing ourselves energetically to be open to having interaction with someone else? Are we putting up barriers, or are we too afraid to approach and be approached? Because sometimes we'll go, oh, nobody comes up and talks to me, or I can't go up and talk to any girls or guys. Are you giving yourself the permission to do that? Or is self-protection coming up and keeping you from giving yourself the opportunity to take the risk? Remember, I've talked about this. Love is a risk. So therefore, dating is a risk, but it's worth it. Because if you don't allow yourself to be approached, or if you don't approach, guess what? Nothing's going to happen, right? So there's an element of this takes courage, and fear comes hand in hand with courage. Or courage isn't like without fear. Courage is in the face of fear. Now, I want to acknowledge this because this has come up for both men and women. So women find, I've heard this actually statistically, that men really aren't approaching women anymore because they're scared. They're scared not of just being rejected. I've heard a lot of men say that women can be really quite mean. But also I think ever since the kind of hashtag Me Too, men are very sensitive that they don't want to offend a woman or cross a boundary. Like, these are the good men, right? That are actually really mindful of that. And so they're not approaching. And then the converse of that I'm hearing is that women are going, no man approaches me anymore. So something must be wrong with me. Maybe I'm ugly. Maybe I'm not doing this right. And so here we are again in a very awkward society that isn't very naturally socially engaged and kind of walking on eggshells and maybe putting up barriers. And women want to meet a man, but they're like, I don't want a man to come up and talk to me because that's rude, or I don't want to be treated like a piece of meat. And so do you see, like, everything's like kind of really gone to opposite extremes. The pendulum swings from one end to the complete other, and we need to find the balance and the equilibrium. I will always say, what is the middle path? And this is why I say we need to kind of chill out a little bit more and be more relaxed. And obviously, the most important thing is that you feel safe, comfortable, confident, grounded within yourself. Because, of course, if someone comes into your space and actually it energetically does not feel okay, you have every right to say you need to leave now. Because some people are going to be unconscious. Some people are going to be disrespectful. Both men and women. It's not just men. Women also, they can be terrible. They can be really mean to men. And a man has the right to say, no. Just as a woman has the right to say, no, right? Boundaries aren't barriers. Boundaries are an act of self-care. But when we're dealing with good people, which I think actually most of humanity, we are pretty good, decent people, we need to just relax and be like, okay, we can just have a conversation. And it doesn't have to mean anything more than just, I'm just getting to know you. Now, insecurity comes in, embarrassment comes in, fear of rejection comes in. What if I go up to that person and they don't like me? What if I go up to that person and they have a girlfriend or a boyfriend? then I'm going to be super embarrassed. Embarrassment and shame is self-judgment based on a story that you're telling yourself. Otherwise, if you look at it from an objective perspective, hopefully if someone is in a relationship, you can kind of tell. They either have a wedding ring on, or maybe they're holding their energy a little bit in because they're out and about, but they don't want to be flirtatious because they've got a partner. But sometimes it's hard to tell because sometimes someone is friendly, and so you might have a friendly exchange with them, and then you might realize, ooh, I'm kind of attracted to them, but actually they're in a relationship. And a lot of people might say, oh, well, then that's a big fail. Like, I should have known that. And sometimes we don't. So again, don't take it so seriously. And also don't attach a story to it. If you go into a story, that is about your relationship to yourself, how you're judging yourself, how you're perceiving yourself. So again, be mindful of the story so you can recognize it for what it is, and then you let it go. But I think we're losing opportunity because we're not taking the risk. It's perfectly fine to go up to someone. Maybe you don't know. Do they have a girlfriend? Do they have a boyfriend? You can ask. You can say, hey, I'm kind of interested in you, but I also really want to be respectful that like you might have a girlfriend, or you might have a boyfriend, or you might actually just not be interested. But if I'm coming from a place of self-worth, I don't have to be embarrassed about it. Because let's say they do have a girlfriend or a boyfriend, or let's say they aren't interested. I don't know anyone that isn't at least flattered by having someone come up and say like, I like you. I've certainly been in relationships and men have come up to me and I've had to really just kindly say, oh, thank you, but I have a boyfriend. There's nothing wrong with that, They might feel a bit embarrassed. I would hope that it would make them feel really comfortable. Like, this is where it's like important, like, be a kind human being. Don't be a bitch. Don't be an asshole. Be a kind human being. To be a kind human being, you got to be kind to yourself. But treat people nicely, and then people, they might make that mistake. The worst thing that can happen is you feel flattered, or they feel flattered, and okay, maybe you feel a bit disappointment that they have a girlfriend or boyfriend, but that's okay. You move on. You go chat with someone else. And if they don't like us, they're not attracted to us in the same way, that's okay. Then they're not the person for us. Great. You got to know that really quickly. I think especially as we get older, get to know the information quick so that you don't waste your time and energy, but don't not take the risk, because otherwise you're guaranteeing that you're not going to have the opportunity. You're guaranteeing that you're not going to meet someone. We've got to find our courage again and take risks. But it's easier to take risks when we know that we've got our own back. It's easier to take risks when we're not going into the story of, see, therefore something is wrong with you and you're not lovable and you're not worthy and you're going to be alone and you're going to have 20 cats and you're going to, you know what I mean? That's a story. Stop believing the story. You are worthy of love. You are good enough as you are. It's just about finding the right person that matches for us. I don't even want to use that frickin' word because it's like, that's the whole dating app culture and, vocabulary. We want to be with people that resonate, that are in our same frequency, that share our same values. So get to know that. Get to know that really quick, especially if you're older and your biological clock is ticking. Don't waste time. Also, if you're coming from a place of lack of self-worth, or your worth is dependent on can you fix that person? Are you going to save that person? Are you the reformer? You don't want to go into those patterns anymore. You don't want to waste your time doing that anymore. We've got to know our worth, and we've got to know what we value. We've got to know what our non-negotiables are and be really concise, not rigid, but concise. If you don't want to waste time, great. Get to know yourself more. Get to know what your values are. Get to know what you won't. The non-negotiables are what's just that's an immediate no. And it doesn't have to come from a place of judgment. Your immediate no could be that person smokes. Right. Not gonna be in a relationship with you. Great. Move on. It sounds really kind of cold and harsh. It's not. It's really understanding. Know thyself. Know who you are. And if you're in a pattern of unhealthy attraction, that is just indicating where you need to do the inner loving work on yourself. Not because you have to be perfect, but because you don't attract and go into those same relationships that aren't serving you anymore. Stop going into the belief and the story that isn't serving you anymore. The reason why we do this work is because I want us all to be happy and at peace with ourselves. I want us all to have true love and connection. Doesn't mean that there aren't going to be challenges. Doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. Life isn't easy, but there are ways to make it more easeful. And so all of these things are a way of making it more easeful. If you're comfortable within yourself, then even when things are hard and there are challenges, which they inevitably will be, even in the best of relationships, life just has its challenges and its obstacles. It will be more easeful if you feel more comfortable within yourself as you move through those challenges. So this is all about our perception, our beliefs. If there's embarrassment, if there's judgment, if there's criticism, if there's rejection, you got to look at what is the story that I'm telling myself. And for you to work through that so that you can just be you and to be authentic dating is like we got to find what natural kind of social interaction is again. And for those of you that are more introverted, it might be pushing yourself, a little bit beyond your comfort zone. But then what I would say this to everyone. I would say this even to extroverts. This idea, again, this is going back to ideas and perceptions that are sometimes like generational, because like now people have the belief, oh, you can only date if you're on a dating app. 10, 20 years ago, that wasn't true. That wasn't a belief system because it didn't exist. So don't make it an absolute, right? But what I encourage everyone to do is don't put this pressure that you can only meet someone this, that, and the other way. The best way you can meet someone is be you. Do the things that you enjoy, that bring you joy, that interest you. And as you're doing those things, allow yourself to be open. Put your chin up, open your eyes, look at people, allow yourself to be seen. Enjoy what you're doing. And that's how you're most likely to cross paths with someone else that is going to be in the same frequency, in the same vibration, in the same values, enjoying the similar things. It doesn't mean you have to be the same for it to be, a relationship, but that there's a ooh, I like their differences. But we've got to keep our eyes open and we've got to lift our chins up. We can't be looking down at our phones all the time, or we can't be just so gone inside that we don't allow ourselves to see and be seen. I think this is the biggest challenge of modern society. We're not looking at each other anymore. And if we are looking at each other anymore, we're kind of like, maybe our eyes are looking up, but energetically we're closed, we're buried, we're in these nuclear pods moving around. We might as well be in like a plastic bubble like hamsters used to walk around, that everyone's like, stay out. And this is another thing, recognize what is the energy that I'm giving off to people. If you were to approach you, what would you pick up? Are you approachable? Or are you not approachable? If you're not approachable, what do you need to do so that you can allow people to feel welcomed to approach us? Because if we're not approachable, it's going to be impossible to meet someone, right? Now, again, feel safe, feel comfortable, feel confident within yourself. Be authentically you, but you got to allow people to approach you. If you have no receptivity, it's going to be damned hard to meet someone, especially if you don't want to approach. So I could so go into the details of this. If you want me to elaborate on any kind of specific tangent, please drop me a line. I'm always happy to take in, what people want me to speak more to. I can only give like a general kind of umbrella of this, but I'm happy to go into more detail about specific things. But here's just a start. So I hope that that's been helpful. I hope that that's offered some food for thought. As always, take it or leave it as resonates and feels right for you. But the invitation is just be you. Be you. Let go of the shoulds and shouldn'ts and how it should be done and in what way it should be done. This is really about just come back to being you. And you might really have to trust in the unknown. And that's okay. You know what? We have a whole hemisphere of our brain that is super up for that. We just happen to live in a very left brain, logical, rational society that needs evidence and an equation for everything. But that's not actually all of existence. That is a very tiny part of existence. Existence is, science, for example, might give a formula and give evidence to that, but it already existed, wasn't not existing. So be aware of that. Don't be too much in your rational mind. Use it. It's helpful. You really need it, but that shouldn't be the commander, right? Allow yourself to be open to the unknown. Allow yourself to dig deep into yourself and trust something that you might have no example of, no past experience of, but if your heart goes, that's what I fucking want, excuse my language, you can have it. You can. Believe it and you will see it. I'll leave you with that. Loving you from afar. Thank you for being here, listening, having the quote unquote conversation, and keep going. All right. Lots of love to you all. Bye. You've been listening to Raw Conversations with Corinne Bloom. Thanks so much for showing up, listening in, and being a part of the conversation with me.